everybody, and welcome to another episode of Eating at a Meeting. I'm Tracy Stuckrad. This episode is a little different from most since I'm not in conversation with anyone this episode. I'm honored to share excerpts from conversations that were at the center of the inaugural La Dame Stay's MFK Fisher Women in Food and Storytelling Symposium. That's a lot of words, but it was a fabulous 2 days of education and conversation. As the media sponsor, Eating at a Meeting, me, had the privilege of hearing some of today's most influential women in food journalism reflect on the past, present, and future of writing about what we eat. I like to talk about what they eat. At the heart of it all is MFK Fisher herself, a pioneering American author whose wit, elegance, and passion for the pleasures of the table reshaped how we think about food. She taught us that writing about food is never just about recipes. It's about love, culture, security, and dignity. Everything that I think Eating in a Meeting is as well. In MFK Fisher's words, she said, quote, "When I write of hunger, I'm really writing about love and the hunger for it, and warmth and the love of it, and the hunger for it." I so love that quote. That's the legacy La Dame's honors with the symposium and what you'll hear in this episode. Clips of two different conversations. The first conversation is between Ruth Reichl and Toni Tipton-Martin. The second is between Marion Nestle, Grace Young, and Kat Craddock. In both conversations, you'll hear how MFK Fisher's legacy lives on in the mentorship, courage, and storytelling of each of these five women. Fisher's words and the voices of these remarkable women remind us that food is never just about sustenance. It's connection to our families, our neighbors, our colleagues, our event participants, and our communities. I hope you enjoy these conversations, even though there's clips of them, as much as I did. And while they're not specifically about eating at a meeting, they speak to the stories, values, and voices that shape how we experience food together at our events, in our communities, around every table. Enjoy. Okay, to start us off, here's Toni Tipton-Martin setting the tone for the conversation that she had with Ruth Reichl, reflecting on the mentorship that Ruth provided Toni and many others, and the path MFK Fisher modeled for all of us.
What we are going to talk about today is the important role that mentorship has played over the course of her career. Many of us have benefited from her indirect modeling that not just she, but also MFK have provided through their writing. And as I said, I am blessed to be one of the privileged who Ruth mentored directly for a very short time.
In this next clip, Ruth shares how she first encountered MFK Fisher's work as a young girl, a moment that showed she wasn't alone in believing food was worthy of serious thought and writing.
I discovered Mary Frances's work when I was a kid. I was this weird kid who loved food in the 50s when food was just not considered interesting or important to 99% of the American population. And my parents had a copy of, I think it was The Gastronomical Me. And it was like I had found a soulmate. I mean, I had found someone who felt about the world the way I did.
Toni then takes us into a vulnerable turning point early in her career at the Los Angeles Times, when Ruth's counsel helped her find her own authentic voice as a journalist. I love this story.
She invited all of the staff to come to her office one at a time, and she asked us what we would like to do. She was trying to get familiar with us. Do you like what you're doing? So I was writing a terrible nutrition column that I hated. But this is Ruth Reichl. What are you going to say? Yes, of course, I'm very happy here. So I had to take a chance, and I told her the truth. And I said, no, I hate it. And she looked over at me and she said, well, what do you want to be doing? And I said, I have no idea. They won't let me write anything. I'm confined in this box. And she said, well, go out into the streets of LA and don't come back until you know. That's the most important counsel I have ever received in my career.
Ruth follows up that story with a reminder that growth often lives in the moments that scare us the most, and how her embrace of new journalism brought creativity and courage into food writing.
One of the things I learned from that, and I learned it over and over and over again in my career, is it's the things that scare you the most that you have to do. Every time I have taken a chance and done something scary, I have been grateful that I did it.
Ruth then also reflects on her philosophy as an editor, encouraging her teams to get out of their chairs, discover their communities, and do what they truly are good at. And I love that she sent them out into the communities, just like Toni did for that one story, to find out where the food really is. And I think that's so important.
I did say to everyone is what do you want to do and get out of here? I mean, because Betsy had made them, I mean, it was basically you were supposed to sit on your seat from 9 to 5. And I said, how do you be a reporter if you're just sitting in your seat? Get out of here. I don't want to see you sitting in your desks. This is an incredible city, and there were some amazing resources there. I mean, Barbara Hansen was she was a pioneer. I mean, definitely unsung. I mean, Jonathan gets all the credit for doing a lot of the stuff that Barbara was doing. I mean, she had been covering what were then known as ethnic restaurants in a way that nobody else in any part of this country was doing, and with knowledge. I mean, she went to Thailand all the time, and she could write. And she had never been given kind of license to do what she was so very, very good at. And, Minnie, who ran a wonderful test kitchen, English wasn't her first language. She wasn't a great writer. And they just give me your notes, I'll write it. But do what you're good at, cook.
In this next clip, and as you can tell, these are the ones that I love the most, together Ruth and Toni then share how they pushed food journalism before the formula of recipes, reimagining what a food section could be and why risk-taking matters.
Broader story than just recipe development, in the same way that you then brought that same characteristic over to us in recipes that you had already begun to nurture in restaurants.
1 year, Lori Ochoa, who was married, is now the managing editor of the LA Times food section, but she was married to Jonathan Gold. And she and I spent 1 year dreaming up what we thought you could do with those 60 pages. And when Shelby Coffey came in as the new editor, I went to see him and I said, you should be embarrassed putting out this food section. It could be in Iowa. It could be anywhere. It does not reflect this community in any way. They're using canned recipes from Campbell's Soup and Swanson's. I mean, they have a test kitchen. This is an incredible community.
Ruth describes the courage it takes to defend new voices and why a great magazine or a great food section must belong to its staff, not just its editor. And I really think that goes into every event that we play in too. It's not just about the upper management. It's about all the people below, the participants, the servers, the banquet captains, everybody. So this to me ties right into what we do at events.
The first section, Lori and I basically wrote we just threw it all out and we wrote the entire section ourselves. How you make a great magazine is you make mistakes sometimes, but that you really make your staff feel like it's their magazine, not your magazine. You dig deep. And basically, I mean, I feel like your job as an editor is to know that you don't know everything.
Ruth then goes on to articulate her vision that food stories aren't trivial. They're central to community life, deserving of the same seriousness as any other beat in the newspaper or in the magazine. That food stories matter.
It was like really incredible fun to figure out how do you introduce the city to all this. I mean, there's this wealth of amazing food out there that deserves to be taken really seriously.
And finally, Ruth closes with words that echoes Fisher's spirit, reading aloud a passage that captures why food writing matters, not just to our palates, but to our dignity and our humanity.
I just have to hope that we're right in the beginning. I brought my phone up with me because I wanted to end this by reading, everybody quotes the MFK Fisher thing about when, I'm really writing about love when I talk about food. But beyond that, in the same paragraph, she says, I believe that one of the most dignified ways we are capable of to assert and then reassert our dignity in the face of poverty and war's fears and pains is to nourish ourselves with all possible skill, delicacy, and ever-increasing enjoyment. And with our gastronomic growth will come, invariably, knowledge and perception of 100 other things, but mainly of ourselves. Then fate, even tangled as it is with cold wars as well as hot, cannot harm us. And I can't think of a better way to describe why writing about food is important.
Now let's get to the conversation between Marion Nestle and Grace Young, moderated by Kat Craddock, editor-in-chief and CEO of SAVEUR magazine. Kat opens the conversation by introducing Grace Young and Marion Nestle, two extraordinary women whose work has shaped not just food writing, but the way we understand food as culture, community, and change.
I'm the editor-in-chief and CEO of SAVEUR, and I'm very thrilled to be moderating this conversation with two extraordinary women whose work has shaped how we all understand food today. And we're here today to explore the power of food writing, not just as a form of storytelling or instruction, but also as a tool that informs, preserves, and sometimes even sparks change.
Here's Grace showing how her journey began with documenting her family's culinary wisdom and how the pandemic of 2020 transformed her into what she calls the accidental voice of Chinatown.
My food writing started when I wrote my first cookbook, The Wisdom of the Chinese Kitchen. But I really I want to record my family's, my parents' culinary wisdom, and they were really great Cantonese cooks. And they told me so much during this period during which I cooked with them for several years. And it was wisdom. It was undoubtedly amazing culinary wisdom. And then the pandemic hit. And I'm called the accidental voice of Chinatown. I saw Manhattan's Chinatown become a ghost town overnight, just like Chinatowns all across the United States. And so I spoke up about it, and I've done all kinds of things to rally support for America's Chinatowns. And now in the last year, my writing has turned to speech writing.
Next, Marion explains why she doesn't call her work activism, but advocacy, and how paying attention to the forces shaping our food system changed everything about the way she wrote.
I don't call it activism, I call it advocacy. But it's very intentional. People don't eat nutrients, they eat food. And they don't really eat food, they eat diets. I walked out of that meeting saying, we nutritionists should be doing this for Coca-Cola. And that's what I did. I started paying attention. And once you start paying attention, it's everywhere.
Grace then paints a powerful picture of what happened in Chinatown across America during the pandemic, and while she felt compelled to speak up when so many businesses couldn't.
2020, when I saw Chinatown literally become a ghost town overnight, these businesses in these Chinatowns lost up to 80% of their business. And I realized that they had no ability of getting their story out. So I realized that my background as a cookbook author gave me credibility. My experience doing interviews was an asset.
Kat turns the focus to the larger question: can food writing truly remain apolitical, or is advocacy part of its very DNA? Sort of like the power and the politics of food writing.
There's this growing conversation around food writing that ventures into the political. In an industry where food media is kind of expected to be apolitical, do you think that there's room for more explicit advocacy-driven food writing?
Marion, of course, answers with clarity, reminding us that food touches everything in society and that writing about it means engaging with politics, whether we intend to or not. And just a side note here is that I did interview Marion on her own a couple of weeks later, and you can check that out on eatingatameeting.com.
I don't think you can be neutral. In a country in which 15% of the population or more doesn't have enough to eat and lives the way Ruth described earlier, or Ruth and Toni described in that article earlier, you can't talk about these things and not be political. When I wrote Food Politics, my book Food Politics, which came out in 2002 and then in 2 later editions, the first question everybody asked me was, what does food have to do with politics? Food connects to absolutely everything that's important in society.
Grace builds on that thought, reflecting on the current climate of anti-DEI sentiment and why representation, resilience, and protecting Chinatown matters more than ever.
Right now, with the climate of anti-DEI, immigrants being demonized, histories being erased, it's so important that we're doing the work that we're doing, more important than ever. And for me, it's so important to remind people that Chinatowns are part of the American story and that immigrants, this country is made up of immigrants, and they are what make this country great.
Marion answers Kat's question with, of course, clarity, as she always does, reminding us that food touches everything in society and that writing about it means engaging with politics, whether we intend to or not.
Far you want to stick your neck out is something that people have to decide for themselves, and it requires an enormous amount of courage. Get out there and do something. That's what these people are being trained to do. Get out there and do it. Figure out how you as an individual can make things better for lots of other people. There are many, many ways of doing it, and I think food writing is a great way.
Both Marion and Grace then share heartfelt advice for anyone hoping to make an impact with their words, the courage it takes, the passion it requires, and the importance of responding to the moment.
You have to have passion, you have to be fearless, you have to listen to your own instincts. But in 2020, I said, I can do that for you, but can I also do a story about the fact that Chinatowns are hurting? And sometimes it's even beyond writing. You know, whatever comes your way, you have to be able to respond.
And finally, we hear what's next for both of them. Grace continuing her urgent advocacy for Chinatowns and Marion digging into food marketing and policy through something as everyday as a cereal box.
Chinatowns across the country are hurting. In Honolulu, San Francisco, and Oakland, Chinatowns close at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And so all of us need to support our local Chinatown, or you need to contact your friends and family who live in cities that have Chinatowns to show up. Because without our support, these historic ethnic enclaves are not going to survive.
I'm working to be published in 2026, a book with a co-author on food and nutrition policy in the United States using cereal boxes as illustrations. We are having the best time. It's a deconstruction. It's a book about food marketing using cereal boxes as illustrations.
These conversations remind us that the stories we tell about food are never small. They carry culture, memory, advocacy, and love. As MFK Fisher showed us, and as these women continue to prove, writing about food is really about writing about life itself. Thank you for joining me in this special episode of Eating at a Meeting. Every guest matters, every meal matters, and every story told at the table matters too. What you've just heard are only snippets, a taste of the wisdom, storytelling, and call to action moments shared by all 5 women. I encourage you to listen to the full conversations for even more insights and practical advice on how food writing can shape our world and how you can be part of that change. Please visit the La Dames d'Escoffier website at ldei.org and know that the next MFK Fisher Women in Food and Storytelling Symposium will be in 2027. Stay safe and eat well until the next episode. Thanks for listening to the Eating at a Meeting podcast, where every meal matters. I'm Tracy Stuckrath, your food and beverage inclusion expert. Call me and let's get started right now on creating safe and inclusive food and beverage experiences for your customers, your employees, and your communities. Share the podcast with your friends and colleagues at our Eating at a Meeting Facebook page and on all podcast platforms. To learn more about me and receive valuable information, go to tracystuckrath.com. And if you'd like more information on how to feed engagement, nourish inclusion, and bolster your bottom line, then visit eatingatameeting.com.